Okay, I think this is now working. I had an intro version of it and it was not showing up. Oh, perfect. Okay. Perfect. A bit of a reverse, but that's okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Paula. This is my first time live streaming, so I'm really excited to do that. So we're gonna talk about product consulting, and we're gonna learn a lot of things along the way. But also, there's probably going to be certain things and that's gonna happen, including the fact that it's my first live stream. So apologies for the technical difficulties if there is some. That's just gonna happen. That's what's gonna be for the first one. Anyways, I wanted to come up here live and talk to you more about who I am, what I'm doing, and just talk about what's been happening so far. As some of you probably know, or maybe not, but 3 weeks ago now, because I've been counting down. So I've launched a product consulting service for everyone. So I've decided to leverage my product management experience to really understand and help to use my product management experience to help startups and product managers alike, because I've been in a situation where I felt overwhelmed, and I know there's tons of people out there who do feel that as well. So it's going to be a fun ride. I hope this time works for everyone, but if not, that's okay, because this is going to be recorded and this is going to be live, so it's okay. And okay, so just an introduction, just more about who I am. My name is Paula. I've worked in different types of environments, starting as a business analyst. I started as a business analyst in a government of Ontario to be exact, and I worked my way to technical business analyst in an architectural firm, a pretty big architectural firm that creates technological transportation management systems for mainly government clients. So it's still government to government, but not the government setting. So I learned Agile from the government, and then I learned how to do that in another government setting. So it's a bit different of a style. And I learned that software development in different environments just is different. There's no set standard, as much as people like to think that there is, and there is some sort of pattern, but every organization have its own needs. Sometimes organically you have to adapt and change depending on who's the management, who's doing things, and whatever is the business needs, or whatever is the pain business goals there. So that's my intro. So that was my second job, and I decided I really want to be product management, and I wanted to go out in the world and see what it's like. So I left Canada and moved to the UK and got a product management job in a startup, and that's when I really understood what it's like to be in a startup. When you have to think about your runway a lot, you have to think about how to get to that product market fit as soon as possible, fail as soon as possible, but at the same time have so many other conflicting advice or conflicting sort of roles, or because if you're a product manager in a startup, chances are you're going to be multiple different roles. Like I have a guide here, and I'll probably do it next, but I was a data analyst, I was a product manager, I was a product owner, I was a business analyst, I was UX researcher. I work with the UX designer, but at the same time, I also did a bit of UX just because we're outsourcing outsourcing a lot of different things or a lot of different roles out there, and QA, and of course work a lot with a growth team during that time. So it was a really great experience and exposure to being in a startup, because now you know different types of it to keep things working. It can be a lot. It is also overwhelming, especially when there's no processes, and that's up to you. And the last one after that was another sort of, it's more established, but the product that I worked on was 0 to 1 launch. It's not even really a product, it's a platform. And that's also its own needs. It has its own pain point, its own needs, because you don't have customers. Whereas the other companies I've worked at, there's customers. So you also have to think about other things, especially when it comes to prod and development. This one, you have to think about it from a different perspective. You want to get there as soon as possible. And at the same time, it's a lot more different, I think, when it comes to 0 to 1 product management, 0 to 1 product launch. So saying that, I've decided to, so being in that experience where you learn everything and you adapt all of what you've learned from the books, Lean Startup, all the podcasts from Lenny's podcasts, Lenny's newsletters, like all these things, the product management handbook. There's so many resources and there's so many resources around product management, and I am happy about that. There's also a lot of community resource guides out there as well. They're all great. But like I mentioned, because each company is different, chances are that role is also is going to change in each company, and the responsibilities are actually a lot more flexible than, for example, a software developer, you code. Product manager, you talk to the customers, you make sure that you make sure that the features that's being deployed are what's going to impact the company in the right direction, or fail fast as soon as possible so that you can pivot to the right direction. But sometimes you can do more than that. Sometimes you become the product owner as well. It depends on the actual company, because now you're going to be doing multiple roles, and especially when it comes to software development. So why am I saying all of that? Because today I wanted to talk about a few things, including the guides that that's been thrown around, that's being shared. So I create a lot of these guides and product management tools and jargon, explaining like some tech jargons that I would have been happy to know immediately during that time that I was panicking as a product manager, when I felt overwhelmed with all of these things. And I know that's very common for a lot of product, and not just product managers, project managers, technical program managers, like Agile. I've talked to some of you, and I know that those things are common. Like, felt like there's just so many things at once. One of the biggest pain point that I've seen is, how do you say no? That's a huge pain point for many. So I wanted to just talk about some of these things and talk about, okay, well then, so this is based off my experience, but also all the books that I've read, and I just put it all together, because a lot of the problems that I found is the resources around are very comprehensive, they're great, but they can be quite verbose. And sometimes you just don't have the time to read like a lot of things and digest. So you want to make sure that you can get the actual point as soon as possible. And I mean, this is for everyone. This isn't just for product managers. I worked in startups and I documented a lot, but while you document, you also have to figure out how to summarize that in 1 to 2 sentences to the people, usually the higher ups, executives who don't have the time to read that. And you have to make it compelling, or you have to like summarize it and make it compelling and to the point that they know what to do, or they immediately understand your message and reply to you. Or else sometimes you have to keep chasing them. And that's happened many times. And that's why it's an art to I think it's an art for those who can translate and contextualize a whole problem and solution in like very little words, when especially in a startup, or especially in like a company where speed is the priority. You need to really put it in words that anyone can understand, even a grade 10 elementary school can understand. And that's what I believe, because there's just not much time, especially when you're when you're kind of going against the runway here. And so that's part of the other reason why I've decided to create these guides. I created these guides as sort of a tidbit to be like, okay, these are the things that you need to know, and you can implement as soon as possible, because it's not perfection, rather it's more progress than perfection, because we might as well get you to the next level rather than keep you at this chaotic environment that you're in, and being surrounded by and being like in this type of role. Most the people I know who are PMs and or in this type of role is quite analytical, which is amazing. But when it comes to being too analytical, tends analysis paralysis. So we just need to get out to the next level and iterate from there. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to do it this way. It's just because when I was by myself, I had to read so much more and have to understand so much more. There's no one to I just need tidbits here and there. And more importantly, in some way, is that I needed to be contextualized in a non-perfect setting. Many books, many questions, and many guides out there, they're very comprehensive, but I do find that a lot of them tend to be idealistic, tend to kind of forget that the environment around them is also not evolving, not chaotic. It seems to be a perfect environment and static. It seems to be a perfect static environment with a problem that is not evolving, which would be great, but sometimes that's not the truth. Sometimes if you're in software development, things change all the time. I've worked where we create an OKR and roadmap based on that, and then we have to pivot almost every month with that monthly OKR, which can be very frustrating, especially once you create a product roadmap, you created all these like features, it's already kind of like set, the devs already know what's about to come. They pull it under a rug. And sometimes it's not your decision, so you can't do anything about it. Sometimes you can try to stop it, but most of the time you can't, because you're just not in that decision-making position. You just don't have it. You can provide advice, you can provide counsel, but you also have to learn how to go with the flow. So those two things, making it needing a guide making a guide that's educative, making a guide that provides the right information in very digestible manner, because I have no time, and assumes that the problem can change at any time. and the environment is not perfect. I think that's kind of the resources that I know. I'm sure there are some out there. It's just not as much and not as many. And I would love to provide more of that. So that's a bit of an intro as to who I am and why I've made these guides so far, and how I hope that these guides help you who want to learn more about product management. And I have talked to some of you who want to learn more about it in a digestible manner that is not as verbose. It's not as too theoretical. It's supposed to be more practical for you. You can easily just do it right now. And it assumes that you can do it within the environment that you're in, because it assumes that you're not in a perfect environment yourself. And so that's you're not in the perfect environment yourself, and that it's going to forever evolve. So it's more about pick and choose what's going to be right for you. So that's kind of the goal for me, to provide you those things. I'll be so happy. And I'm actually really, really grateful for those who followed me so far, because that's really nice. It's nice to hear that those guys are actually really helpful. And I've talked to some of you, and it's nice to know that, you know, you're using it as a way to help talk to the developers better, help push back, even using it as a frame of reference when it comes to interviewing, because a lot of people are in the stage of interviewing right now. So I am very excited for that. Anyways, so for today's agenda, let's see. I have a couple here. The first is why your backlog is killing your sprint velocity and how to fix it. So this is actually based off that product versus sprint backlog breakdown, which I have no clue how it became the most popular guide I've created. I'm very grateful for that. I'm trying to figure out how to do it again. And sometimes it's organic. It's all organic. And I'm so grateful that it just got its momentum. So I decided to take that and make it further and talk about and expand on it. And today we're going to expand on that. I've also, like I mentioned, talked to a few of you, and I've gotten some questions. So how to push back, that's a big one, without being a difficult PM. So one of the followers, one of the people here ask, how do you talk to your stakeholders? Like, how do you keep developers and stakeholders aligned? Because you are you are in the middle of the communication. And how do you push back those feature requests or sometimes make sure that devs can do it? So it's a different balance. The second one is actually really interesting. Jira. Now, I don't know if you've watched some of my other videos, but I always think process over tools. So, which is pot. But process over tools, meaning Jira is a powerful tool. But if you don't use it the way your organic team flows in terms of process, it's going to be really hard. So it's kind of like you're swimming against the current if you don't know how to use it. So Jira is not the to-do list, how to make it a real collaboration tool. So it's not just something that you dread. It's actually something that you love looking at. And this is a very interesting question because it was put to use into a safe environment. And we can talk about that later. But safe and agile is safe environment, or safe in an agile framework. That's a very interesting conversation online. It's actually one of the more I think controversial, or one of the more people have opinions on it. It's kind of like the brutalist movement in architecture, I think. And the last one is how to network without feeling awkward. And this is actually a really nice one. There's a few people I've talked to who just came to the city and they want to be able to just grow their career, but also meet new people. But it's a bit difficult when you're new, or how do you do that? So, okay. So we're gonna do that. So those are the 4 main things. And I mean, I'm gonna take my time with it. So we're gonna take our time with it. So the first one, like I mentioned, it's a sprint versus product backlog. Now, that post was one of the most popular posts. It's the most popular post I've gotten. I still have no clue how, but it clearly resonated with so many people out there, because I can assume that actually I've talked to some of you, and so many people probably use backlog and they put sprint and product backlog at the same time. And that's actually quite common, and not because people want to be chaotic. It's just, like I mentioned, especially in a company where there's not set rules and guidelines and processes, and you're expected to move really fast at lightning pace, very fast at lightning pace. And because the runway's short, you need to go product market as soon as possible, and many other reasons that makes you have to not care about the process, and just make sure that you can deploy as many features as possible so you can go to the market as soon as possible. I can resonate that the outcome of that is that you have a backlog that's very chaotic and can be and would be confusing for you, because you have no clue what's in priority. What should you do next? Is this a sprint? And then your software devs would look at it and be like, what do I do next? Which ticket do I do? And if you have no process for that, or if you have a process where they can't just pick the ticket on the top and do it themselves, it becomes it actually becomes a time waster, because people keep asking you questions. Also, if those tickets that they create or they start taking, the devs start taking a ticket and it's not sized well, it's missing information, it's missing all of these things, it's missing key information, key assets, and all these things, that's going to be a time waster. So that's why this sprint backlog versus product backlog is quite very important, yet underserved or underrated. It's an important but underrated tool or concept that people don't use in their day-to-day operations. So yeah, let's just do it for now. So I'm going to add it here. And so we have the sprint versus product backlog. It's a practical workbook. And I just put the summary of what a sprint backlog is and a product backlog. The better summary is actually in the original guide. But this one is just so that you remember the sprint backlog is what you use during a scrum. If you have a scrum or you have a Kanban, just the sprint backlog are the tickets that your team is ready to develop on. You take it and they're going to develop on it. And the ownership, as I mentioned, as I put here, is development team and scrum master. If you are in a startup, I don't know if you have a scrum master. So chances are it might also be you. If not, then it's great, because you have a scrum master that allows you to not have to take on that role, and they can own this. They can own this, which is great. Refine task and ready for development. It's the same thing as I mentioned before. If you're in a scrum, before that sprint begins, you have some sort of point or story pointing session, backlog refinement session, or grooming session, whatever you want to call it, where your developers or key developers come into a room and they estimate the effort, or chances are you also groom before that with just one dev lead if you have the time. And no, this is actually like how you should do it. But if you have no time, then it's a bit difficult. But you groom it with a dev lead to make sure that they can check that the ticket is ready to be estimated for an effort. But if that's not possible, then you kind of just use this time where the devs ask you more about this ticket, and you want to make sure you have enough information there so that they can actually estimate it, and then you can put it in the sprint backlog. Or else, we can talk about that. It's also in this book. Or else you're going to have to go back and find the right resources for it. So that's this one here. The second one is product backlog. So this is what I would say confuses many product managers in the backlog, because you want this there, but chances are these are the ones that don't have information. This is long term. It's not ready to be developed, or it's not prioritized to be developed. And sometimes it's just a one-liner too. It's just need a button to onboard. Need to change a button. And for need to add an add cart button in landing page. Don't know why you would want that, but actually depends on your landing page, but you might just want that. But it's not in priority. You don't really, it could be like something that came up. It's just you kind of put it there. And the whole point is for you to use this as a way to workshop on ideas, what you need next. If there's OKRs and KPIs that needs to be done or have been added, you can use this and align it to that. It's kind of like it's all the other tickets that you know are coming up, but you don't need it yet, or it's coming up but you still need backlog grooming. And then there's also the other part that I didn't mention here, but it's in the guide. There's like a parking lot. You want to separate that. If you have time, you want to separate that from the product backlog, because that's the one that's like really nice to have. So this one is, I would say, so if this one is more should have, must have. This is more must have, could have. And the other one would be nice to have. Sometimes this can have nice to have, but the other one's really nice to have. And I'm just using the Moscow method for framework because I think that's one of the most popular ones, but there's so many other ways to prioritize that. And so I put this page as like, what is a complete ticket? Because when you do backlog grooming, you want a complete ticket. You want to make sure that the devs are there and they understand. You want to make sure that when you have a backlog grooming, the devs are there and they give you, when you have backlog grooming, the devs are there and you want to make sure that your tickets are descriptive enough that they can actually estimate it properly. Now, sometimes your ticket is actually not great, but they would still force it. I do realize that when that happens, where there's enough, like there's user story, there might be a description, there might be an asset, but not necessarily, and then that asset kind of becomes some sort of acceptance criteria. So you don't really necessarily add the acceptance criteria, but you add the asset, which could be like the landing page and how it would look like in that landing page, like a mock-up. So you just use that as your so you just use your mock-up as an acceptance criteria. So in some ways it looks like it's ready, but because they don't have that acceptance criteria, you didn't put what you want necessarily. And so what tends to happen is there's a bit of a like a game of telephone, because that's when scope creeps happen. Scope creep is one of those things that comes up when the devs just assumes that this is what, based on the mockup, this is what needs to happen, or this is how the button needs to kind of be interacted with or interact with the next page. Some developers, some front-end developers, I've worked with them, very specialized, very great. They know what to do. Some, it just becomes a problem. So just letting you know, there are tickets that seem like it's complete, but the less complete it is, the more chances it'll have scope creep. And what was the other one? The less complete it is, the chances are scope creep, and there's another one. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. Yeah. So what do you need? Like a title, so they know, like, you need a title every time. So it'd be nice if the title just tells them what it is. Ticket type is feature, bug, tech debt, or improvement. Is it a new feature? Is it a bug? Is it a tech debt that is stopping or slowing down other future tickets or other tickets in the sprint? Or is it an improvement? Is it something that needs to be improved on? It doesn't necessarily, and is it like for a current feature or ongoing feature? Is it something that needs to be improved on? Description, chances are just contextualize it. What's the ticket about? And what's the problem that's solving? And just contextualize it, and why this new solution is, or this new feature, this ticket needs to be developed. User story is an extension of that description, because it just provides the developers more context as to who's using it, how they're using it, and why it's important. Now, if you don't have time, one perspective is enough. But of course, the more perspective, the better it is. It's just, like I mentioned, it's about your time. And that's the finite resource in all of this. You don't have that much time. Acceptance criteria, like I mentioned, this is one of those things that you want to make sure is hit on. You want to make sure that this is hit on, mainly because acceptance criteria is basically telling the developers what needs to happen, or how this feature needs to be implemented, or when I QA this feature, when I use this feature, it needs to do this step and this step, and this, it needs to turn green, and it needs me to go to the next page. It needs to have my data, whatever I fill up goes to this database. Maybe not too specific, but it depends on the product itself. It needs to tell the dev basically a checklist of how they know that they're done creating this feature or developing this feature. Because like I mentioned, you can have a mock-up and you think that that's an easy enough acceptance criteria, but they'll be wondering, where's it stored, or how's it going to interact with the next page, or scope creep can come up with that. And also, that's what I wanted to say. Scope creep comes up with this when it's up to the developer's imagination, and now you're wondering like why it's taking so long. It's taking so long because the ticket wasn't estimated properly. They were estimating based on just a mock-up. They're not estimating based on how they know that they're done. And so I do think acceptance criteria is one of those key things that you need to add in order for scope creep to kind of be away as much as possible. And so that's acceptance criteria. Story points is when they come into the backlog grooming or refinement, backlog refinement, and they come in, they read your ticket, they say, oh, this is 4, 8. This is a large. Depends on what it really, the pointing system depends on what you want it to be. Some people like estimated hours. Some people some people actually don't know how long a ticket can take. So sometimes they would just time block it or time box it within like, okay, I'm going to do this ticket for 20 hours so that we'll see how much I can do this. Because sometimes you have tickets that you can't actually do all of these for because it's more of an research. It's more R&D sort of ticket so that you know whether you can actually create a feature in your development, or if you want to explore AI search bar, for example. If you want to explore AI, for example, and how that's going to integrate with your search bar, well, that's a really big ask, but a way to kind of do an R&D is just time box it so that you know, or someone can kind of see how that's going to work. So that's also more of an advanced thing in terms of tickets, but this is just normal. Hey, I need a new feature. Hey, I need this bug fix. Hey, I need an improvement sort of situation. So yes, story points, that's a good question. So that's a good time for them to give you how much effort it'll take. A lot of people like to put time on it, but I find that controversial as well. Some people hate that, some people love it. But the better ticket, actually, this is the other thing, the better you create your tickets, the better they estimate the tickets. And if you use Jira, or I'm sure any other tool out there, once you start knowing that consistently with your team, you're going to find velocity. Velocity is one of the key points or key things as to why these story points are quite important, because velocity shows you or gives you the estimate of how long your ticket, how long or how much features you can actually add in a sprint. Because you can add a lot, but many times those tickets are moved on to next sprint. And if they're not moved to the next sprint, then you did not add enough. It'd be nice if you can add, I think 100% isn't even, it depends on your team. It depends on the team and what they want. But if you always if the team always finishes the jobs or the tickets in that sprint, chances are you can add more, or they're not estimating properly. On the other hand, if they can't change, if so many tickets are always left over. So for example, there's like 20 tickets in the sprint and there's always 10 that's never been done. Chances are you're not estimating properly, or there's scope creep, and you know that there's always problem, or you're putting too many tickets in not knowing your velocity. So this is why I'm saying, like, it's a lot easier for you to start when you know your velocity and they're estimating properly, it's a lot easier for you, making it so much easier for you in your life to estimate how long things are going to take. Priority level. So how important is this ticket in the backlog? Like I mentioned, chances are if they're in sprint backlog, they probably should have and must have already. Nice to haves can be in the sprint backlog if, for example, there's not enough points in that. For example, your velocity is 50 points and you're at 45 or 48. And you have 48 points. And every must-have you have is like 8 points, 5 points, 3 points. So you're kind of just trying to play Tetris at this point, trying to figure out what can you do next, or is this fine? And you have like a nice to have that's 2-pointer. Change the translation or change the spelling. 1 point. Change the spelling. That's a nice to have. You can easily put that there. So that's why it's just because it's nice to have, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be in the sprint backlog. It's just you also have to figure out your velocity and use the velocity your team has and the story points that you have to make sure that everything's together. But you estimate properly if you have better tickets, and you have better tickets if you put all of these things in your ticket. You put all of these concepts, as many as possible. Dependencies and blockers. So this is just if you have a feature that needs to be done first. And so a ticket cannot be started because another ticket is currently not done yet. And they need that kind of, they need that either R&D, they need that feature first, they need that fix first before they can start your ticket. So that's just, it's more optional. It's just good to know. It's very important to know, especially in a sprint. And chances are the development team would be better at figuring out which ones are dependencies and blockers, or if you have a Scrum team or a Scrum owner, and they're the ones every day doing daily stand-ups and be like, what's your blocker? Well, they would just put that in the ticket itself. Sometimes you don't know the dependencies and blockers until after the backlog refinement, but chances are if you have a backlog refinement, which can take some time, you can recognize the blockers then and there too, but not always. So one or the other. Attachment and reference, like I mentioned, that's all the mockups, charts, whatever you need to kind of help visualize something, or if you need to put all the copy in one page, then this is all the documents for it. Or if you need to run the data and add certain people for it, this is the CSV for that. So this is just, the reference and attachment that needs to be there in order for the developer to do it. Yeah. And I created this to kind of provide you just what is it's a good ticket, what's not a good ticket, or this is an example of a good ticket. So there's a title, there's a description, acceptance criteria. So you can see acceptance criteria is like, do this, you implement the step-by-step progress bar, add tooltips. It has to have a tooltip, it has to have like reduce the steps and all these things. References is the mockups. Dependencies and blockers, as you can see, is kind of like it's referencing another ticket. Priority level is it's must have, or story points has been pointed as 8, which is pretty, normally high, because if it's 12, it's a lot. If your velocity is 50, that's 8. Like anything more than 8 is a lot. Actually, previously for us, if it's more than an 8, we break down that ticket. So if it's a 12, or actually there's more than that. I forgot how Fibonacci, 2, 4, 8, 2, 4, 8, 12, like 20, I think. That's how it is. You break that down. you break down that ticket. That's a way for us, how we used to do it. Title clearly defined. This is something I did not add there, but I should have added, is epic. So epic is a theme for that ticket. So if, for example, a theme is to grow users in the increase user growth in landing page. Well, that's ticket under it. So we want to improve those user onboarding flow. You want to, another theme might be changing the copy for it to make it different. So that's a lower story point, but it is still in the same epic because it all aligns to that same KPI or OKR that needs to improve that user growth. And an advanced version of this is each one of these has an OKR and KPI, because you also need to make sure that it's successful, the feature is successful. But it also, because like sometimes an improvement, sometimes a framework change isn't also, it's harder to do OKRs per ticket. So you kind of want to just align it to an epic, but it depends on, someone can actually tell me what's better on that end, because I've always thought OKR is better for epic, and then it just aligns, because you can't just force a ticket to have an OKR. For example, if you're going to change React, if you're going to refactor, does that need a KPI and OKR? So that's kind of my question there. Another one here is, someone did mention adding type, not type, like laptop. Is it desktop? Is it mobile? Is it tablet? And that is very important, especially when it comes to mobile responsiveness or app. Like, is it desktop app? Is it mobile app? Chances are you have two teams if you're a big company to do that. So that is very important in terms of the ticket, to make sure it goes to the right team. And another thing is geography. So sometimes these certain features are only per geography. Like it's only North American, or it's only Europe. It depends on that, or like a Spanish translation would only be in the Latin American countries, for example. So there is that. The only reason why I didn't add it here is because, like I mentioned, my assumption is that you are in a environment where everything is crazy and you just need to start somewhere. And chances are, if you're in a startup, you have a product that haven't scaled yet, and that far, like you haven't needed to have a specific app for just the US, or a specific app for just Canada, or like all these things. You don't have that yet. And you don't also have a specific geography, or your desktop might just be, or your mobile app might just be responsive to the desktop. So it's not as prioritized. Unless you go mobile first, then the assumption is you just have tickets that's only for mobiles. So that's kind of what that is. Wow, I'm seeing so many things. So yeah, so the whole point of this workbook is you want to use this as an activity to audit what you currently have. So if you have a backlog that is confusing and you don't know where to start, and you don't, like, for example, if you're, like I mentioned, if you're always running out of time, or there's so many other things you need to do, but you also know that you need to really prioritize this, and you have like maybe only a day or less than a day to dedicate to like organizing everything, this is probably the assumption for that, is you have less than a day. Of course, it's better if you have like at least 2-3 days to kind of really organize it. And that's when you can start kind of thinking, oh, I'm missing this type of information. I can start doing this, but this is just to organize. So in terms of cleaning, you're just kind of like throwing everything out there. We're going to audit it. So all the tickets that you have, and I would say this, sometimes your tickets aren't all in the right place. Sometimes you have tickets that's currently in Jira or Trello or whatever it is that you're using. And sometimes it's in a document because you were in the meeting and you haven't had a chance to transfer that feature request from a stakeholder or from someone into the proper bucket that's supposed to be. So the whole point is before identifying the ticket type, identify all the point of contacts that you have that might have a ticket or a feature request or anything. Can even come from Zendesk as a sort of like stakeholder thing. And like your customers might have requested that, like your departments might have requested. It could be an email from your or Slack message from a marketing department or a sales department. Put it all together in one place. And you don't necessarily need to add all the information around it. You can just add a ticket, a name per ticket, a name per request. Because the whole point is to collect all of them and put them in one place, in one bucket, so that you can do this. So that's the first step. Step 0. Do a full audit to where your feature requests are, where it is, could be where it's all living. Just copy paste it. And then depends on the company, depends on what you're supposed to have. If you're the only product manager, and great, then you can just choose whatever you want. Although if the company, for example, is paying for Atlassian, then chances are you could do Jira or Trello. I think Jira is the free version of it. Free. They're paying Atlassian, so like they want you to use whatever they're paying for. Just use whatever. There's a lot out there, so many out there. The whole point is you don't overthink the tool right now, because the tool can come later. So put it all in one place. Take your time and do that. Assuming you've done that, assuming that you've picked what you want as terms of the tool, now we can start this. Now, go over each ticket. Now with AI, you can kind of do this like a lot quicker, but at the same time, you have to really have configured it the way you want to. So I'm going to assume you don't have your AI configured for this. But it might be good anyway. This is a good exercise for you to really understand what's happening in your development and in your environment. So you have a ticket. You go through each and one of them. And the first things first is this a bug? Is this a feature? Is this a technical debt that I know needs to be developed or to be in the sprint eventually because it's slowing us down? Or is it an improvement? And I want you to go through all of that and just identify it. And you can easily do that, I think. That's actually one of the easiest things. Does it have a clear description, acceptance criteria, estimated effort? You might not have estimated effort, especially if you haven't done the backlog refinement. So I would put this sort of like clear description is the first things first. As to if there is missing, then add it there. Acceptance criteria can come later. But clear description allows you to prioritize things. Does it have a user story? I would say contextualize it, add it into the clear description. And does it have assets or attached to it? If it does, then you know that ticket's probably you've done more, that ticket is probably going to go to the next sprint as soon as possible. But if it doesn't, then maybe this is new. You can recognize if it needs it. I would just put in the comment in each ticket, be like, it needs acceptance criteria, it needs estimated effort, it needs an epic. Put it in a bucket. I honestly I could even use sheets for it. It's just like what it needs. Or in Jira, like it just label what it needs. It's fine. But the whole point is put it all together in one place. And the dependency and blockers, you don't need to know that right now, because you can you can do that more later in the backlog grooming. Now the next step is prioritizing that ticket. You can do this through a workshop. You can, if there's the business OKRs and alignment, the goals for that not that quarter or the next quarter, whenever you think that this needs to happen, then great. You can prioritize according to that. Prioritize the ticket according to what you know, or if you actually have time and there's process around this, get the proper people in that team as stakeholders that you need to be in. Chances are this is kind of the tricky one, because you want a prioritization team with the right people or with people, but at the same time, there's also no time sometimes. So use your discretion. It's in your discretion. It depends on where you're at the moment. If you are running for that runway and you just need to go, then go, but and just be accountable and this is how to be accountable. It's just like, okay, this is a must-have because it aligns to the OKR right now. It's a should-have because it can, but it doesn't really align to it. But then it's blocking the ticket that does align to it. We could have it. It's nice. It could have it, but we don't need it right now. It's nice to have. It'll always be nice, but it's too much right now, and it's probably in the future. That's just a way for you to kind of constantly do it. If you have, I'm thinking like you might have 100 tickets here, maybe more. That's why I assume that you have 100 tickets. So that's why I mentioned like a day at least to kind of do this, but maybe more. And I can mention, like, if you can get AI to kind of help you with it, then great. So now that step 2 is prioritization. Like I mentioned, it's great if you properly do it, because it's just good to have your team align, or the proper stakeholders align, and they know the OKRs, they know what's coming up, and they've helped you prioritize the features. Now, if you're really short on time, and this isn't everyone, but if you're really short on time and you need to make that fast decision immediately, you can technically skip it. Technically skip prioritization 2, or step 2, which is prioritization, and you can kind of jump into the next step. I wouldn't recommend this. I would only recommend this if you're really short on time, like the money is not there. And because once you keep skipping the prioritization part, it's going to be harder and harder for you to kind of be accountable as to why your prioritization happens. It can lead to more unbalanced backlog. People can kind of, there's more room for criticism when you don't put the right people in those workshops. That's kind of where the politics can happen as well. So, it's a give and take. It depends on the situation you're in. Okay, so like I mentioned, if you don't have the time to do the step 2, you can just ask yourself if it's going to be product backlog or sprint. Is it a critical bug fix? Is it destroying? Is the prod down? is your product down right now because of this bug? Chances are it's in the sprint backlog, and chances are it has to be in a developer right now as we're speaking. Was this planned? Like, do developers know about this before the sprint began? If yes, then good, because then it's been estimated, it's good, and it's in the sprint backlog. Now, there's many tickets that sometimes want to come in the middle of the sprint, mainly from a request that's really hard for you to say no. Sometimes the purpose of product management, product ownership is saying no. And sometimes it slips and it goes to a sprint backlog. But if not, then if it keeps happening, I mean, like, if you keep allowing features that's not planned to be in sprint, you're not going to be popular with your team. It's just not going to happen. You are not going to be popular in that team, and you don't want that for yourself. That is giving you more headache than it needs to, and there's going to be more animosity, and you don't want that in that framework, in that workplace that you're in. So there is a balance of that. I do find that the balance is dependent on how you talk to people, how you say no, how you kind of like give and take. And that is something, I think, a community of product management, and that's why I'm also doing this guides. It's just like, if you're in the community of people who are in the same situation, that's why you want someone that's more outside of the company to help you kind of deal with it. And that's kind of, anyway, so that's a problem that I've found that I find that happens quite often. User stories that's ready for devs. Does it have a clear acceptance criteria? I talk about acceptance criteria quite a bit, but if it does, put it in the sprint backlog. If it doesn't, then book a time with a developer or someone that you know. If you don't know what else needs to be there, just book a time with someone. Usually what needs to be there is just like, what for you is like, what needs to be in this feature that allows you to say, this is all good, it's fine, there's no problem, I can do this feature. Or it needs to have all the steps for you to say that I think this feature is now done, and I'm happy that I could test it accordingly. So that's kind of just how you do it. Technical debt, most likely product, as much as the devs hate that, it's mostly going to be in product backlog until it starts slow. I mean, in an ideal world, there is time for it. So if, for example, it's a 3-pointer and you have 47 points and it's a nice to have, put it in. But in an ideal world, there is always time for it and there's space. But in general, the way I've seen it is that technical debt will become a bug before it's fixed. And as much as I would rather not let that happen. A good tip might be to have space for technical debt every sprint, but it also just depends. It depends on the goals that you have that sprint. Like, maybe have at least 5 points dedicated to it. But like I mentioned, it really depends on the velocity you have, the sprint you have, and the deadlines and the milestones that's coming up. So use your discretion. I think that's a big question. This is a big thing. Just use your discretion. Feature requests. Does it need research before implementation? Yeah. If you haven't done enough research, you don't know it's OKRs, you don't know why you have it there, then put it in the product backlog. This is the scope creep that's going to come up. And if your ticket is not clear enough, this is when your devs come up to you and keep asking you about this ticket. That's how you know that ticket's not good or it's not researched properly, is when the devs come up and keep talking to you. It's just like, oh, there's a problem with this. Like, what about that? Why is this? Can I do this instead? And actually, you can have that in a good ticket, but at the same time, if you don't know the answer to it, that's when you know that, okay, I need to research a little bit more. And sometimes you don't have all the answers in the world, and that's still okay when you do the sprint backlog, the backlog grooming for it. But make sure that it's not a blocker or dependencies when it is in the sprint. I'm just going to say it could be a time waster if you don't research enough for it. Just have enough. I'm saying so much, but just have enough that it has all of these things, and you should be fine. Product roadmap initiative. Is this part of a bigger strategic goal? It's more like this is whole like, is it nice to have or could have? If it's strategy and it's great, but you don't need it right now, and there's a lot more must-haves, then just keep it in the product backlog, and that's fine. Okay. So this is just more troubleshooting, what happens if you don't have these things. Well, don't have the key details, and put it back in the product backlog. Find the right people to work with, get it, and then put it down so that it can be ready for the next one. Is it vague? Do more research about it. Just make sure that there's a label on it that says like, oh, just needs refinement, just need to do this, needs research and all that stuff. But if it's like unclear but urgent request, so suddenly there's a critical bug that just happened or just been realized, and you don't know enough about it, but you need to know, just say like, critical bug, there's a the feature is not working, and that should be enough. Like, this is more like critical bugs anyway. But usually I would create a ticket for that and give it to a dev. If it's like a priority, it's like high priority, then they have one of them. It has to like one of them, like whatever the ticket that they're doing at the current moment has to be dropped, because this is disrupting the actual software. This is disrupting the users. So that'll be it. Yeah. So that's just a way, like a deep dive of how you would use this workbook to it's just a deeper dive. It's just a deeper dive as how you would use this workbook in order for you to kind of just get progress. If you're feeling overwhelmed with, there's so many backlog items, like there's like more than 100 tickets, and then suddenly you just don't know what to do with it. You know that there's more than 100 tickets, it's a problem. But chances are there are things where I'm just like, oh, some of them are irrelevant already, some of them are still relevant, some of them you just need to categorize. This is just a way for you to kind of be able to, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Sometimes when you're overwhelmed, there's too many choices and there's too many things that you need to do. This is a way for you to be like, okay, just drop everything, just do it. Put it all together and categorize each one. Time block some of the time on your calendar for like 2 hours, 3 hours. You don't have to finish it in a day, to be fair. You just have to keep doing it. So, and this is a good guide for you to kind of get started on that and just do it. Yeah, that was so that was quite long, I think, in terms of that. Okay, so the next bit here, let me just drink some water because that's a lot. Okay, so the next bit here is more Q&A. So I talked to a couple of people who have enjoyed my content so far. And like I mentioned, I'm very, very grateful, and I'm so happy that I can be helpful to people. And I know that some of you also feel, what I used to feel, like overwhelmed, or they just need like the information. And this is a great way for you to have that. So I'm just gonna put some things here. So one of a very important one, and this is a really good question for every product manager, product owner, whoever project manager is there, how to push back on bad ideas, or how to push back in general without being seen as difficult. And I think this is actually really, really, this can be quite relevant, especially if you're in an environment that seems political. So this came from a very lovely person. And she was just kind of explaining her situation about getting some requests or feature requests from business owners, and I guess getting them in a way that seemed like it's urgent. And everyone's been through this, I think. It's just, it seems urgent. Everything seems urgent. And so now they have to figure out how to appease, or I guess in some ways please the business owners, while also not disrupting the flow of development. Because if you know, like I mentioned, if you put a ticket in the middle of the sprint, you're not going to be popular eventually. And you keep putting it, put it once or twice, and it can be understandable, especially if it's like a critical bug. But if you keep putting it, and you've already kind of like had a sprint planning beforehand, you're not going to be seen as reliable. You're going to have worse connections or worse relationship with your devs, and you don't really want that either. So how do you push back to this? So for this question, how would you push back? And I actually want to know from people around me. Like, I would love to hear what you say first, because I have my own opinions on this, but I also want to know what your opinions would be when it comes to it. Because I think I wrote mine somewhere, but yes, let me know what you think. I would love to know how would you do this? What is it? Okay. Yeah, mine was here. Okay. So the way I would push back is such a weird word. There are many. So what's the purpose here? The purpose is for you as a product manager to deliver the features that you need, or that you understand aligns with the business values or the business KPIs or OKRs. So you're protecting that. You're protecting that whole you're protecting that whole system. At the same time, you're also, or in definition, you're also kind of be championing the user side too. So it usually aligns. Business, not always, but you're balancing the business needs and the business KPIs with what the customers, based on the data that you have, user research, data analysis that you have, what the customers like, what they don't like, what type of improvements or features are needed for them. And chances are, if you're doing it properly, you can align what those features are based off the user research that would, align to the business needs. They need more, generate revenue. Well, then, that from the user research, this part here gets them to upsell. The feature gets them to more users like this feature, and so you can upsell that. But it really depends. This is why the prioritization workshop is also very important for you, because that's the time where you can align all these things. That's actually why, like I mentioned, you don't want the politics can happen without that alignment. So knowing that, if a business owner suddenly has like a feature request and they want it right now, like I think one of my skits was like, I want DeepSeek and the AI integration right now, like in this sprint, because it doesn't take that long, according to ChatGPT. Well, you're gonna have to figure out how to say no to that because you're in the middle of the sprint. And if they want that right now and it's not been verified, it's not been researched, there's no ticket for it, that's a very hard situation to be in. But in many cases, a lot of founders and CEOs and CTOs, they're quite reasonable. So not a lot of them are gonna take offense saying no when you say no. But I also could be lying, and some of them have really just, you can't reason way out of it. But let's say you can. Let's say you can reason yourself. Well, a good opportunity is saying like, well, we're in the middle of a sprint. This is the roadmap currently. Do you think that if we add this will take this much time, and we're going to have to drop all of these things that connects to your KPIs right now? Is that really what we want right now? Is that important for you? So it's not a no, but it is a yes, but. And that's always been, that's kind of the whole point of why you have these product roadmaps and tools and prioritization workshop, is so you have alignment. And that's why you want to make sure that these people are in those specific workshop, because the more that they're in there in the beginnings of the workshop, the more that they understand and the more that they provided effort into it. So it's a lot easier for them to remember, oh yeah, I was in that workshop, I was there, I also said the same thing. Oh no, okay, so I guess that this DeepSeek integration would not be good because I don't want to be losing the upsell feature. That's kind of that's a way to do that. That's a way to kind of push back. It'd be like, hey, is make sure that they're in the right that they're in those meetings. And I don't know, it depends on so I would say a caveat to that is, if you're in a bigger company, sometimes you don't have their time, right? There's no time for them, and they're doing too many things, and you can't have them in each of those prioritization workshops. I would say sum up all of that. That's why when I said documentation into 2 sentences, that's where this becomes a key thing, is that if you are able to sum up, you don't have to put it in 2 sentences, but if you're able to sum up like, hey, this is the prioritization meeting, this is how it's going to align to this, and put that out there somewhere for them to see, for them to have a 5-minute, for them to be able to digest that in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And if they have questions, they can call you, or you can call them, or make sure that they're okay with it. It's a lot easier for them to know that there is a disruption. What they're asking for is a disruption. And so it's a yes, but it's a no, and you were able to push back, but not in a way that, I find that there's a lot of product managers who are people pleasers, and I can even attest I've been that sometimes. But this is a way for you to be able to stand your ground. Is it could be a really good feature too, right? So it could be a really good feature, but you understand, let them understand that you're going to be sacrificing a lot more, and you can put in the backlog. You can put it in backlog and actually like work on it if you think it's a really good feature too. How do I, while ensuring developers and stakeholders in it? The other side of it is developers too. If there's chances where you really can't push back to whoever, you want to have a good relationship with your developers. You really do. This is why I said like try to, as much as possible, be that reliable PMs for them that protects them. But if you really can't, this is one of those, like, be very you have to know when to do this too. It could be like could happen. It depends on the context, and honestly, this is also the time where if you have a third party PM or product manager or like a community of product management, this is the perfect time to kind of ideate that situation, like brainstorm it and be like, okay, so how are we going to say that to the product manager? How are you able to say that to your developer? Make sure that you don't sour their relationship. Same with the stakeholder, like how are you going to do this? So this is kind of the best time to have that idea. So if you have another person to talk to, that'd be great. If not, there's a community, and I'm actually creating a community for that. So it'd be nice to have you sort of, and I have this live stream for it too. So like come here, have a question, and we can like role play around it. But that's why. Anyways, I hope that's good enough, or think I've said enough for now. I'm sure there's other things, but we can move on to the next question, which is Jira is not the to-do list. How to make it a real collaboration tool. So this was such an interesting question. Not like the context of this was, it's actually for an interview for this person. I'm actually so excited about it because it was Jira in the context of enterprise level. As I mentioned, while I'm focusing a lot of startups, but I did work in an enterprise level, a lot of, especially in the beginning, government tangential projects, like a lot. It was multi-million dollars for government clients, like that type of software. And and so using Jira in that safe environment is interesting. It's interesting. So basically, for those who don't know, I mean, people know, if you're watching this, chances you know Jira, and it's a very powerful tool. There's a lot of things out there, and I mentioned it earlier in process over tools, meaning you want to know what the team is like or what the company is like before you actually customize the tool for it. And that's what this question is about. This is an enterprise level company, big company, and this product that I think it was a product that they're working on, needs to be in a safe environment or has been suggested into a safe environment. So how are they going to utilize Jira for it? And for those who don't know, safe is kind of one of these, there's so many people out there, and people, you can tell me more about this, but safe is part of the Agile framework, but it's such a controversial part of the Agile framework. It's not as simple as Kanban. It's not as simple as doing and done. No, it's not. It's a lot. There's a lot more processes than Scrum. I think there's 10 key points, I think, with safe, and one of them is like systematic thinking. And the whole point is you don't want safe in startup, because the whole point of it is it provides a lot of transparency with so many departments. So if there's a product and there's a lot of teams that needs to have eyes on it, it provides that transparency. but it also slows down development because there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy that comes up with it. So it depends on the company you want to work with, or it depends on your personality. If you like more faster pace, you want to go at it, you just want to go iterate and deploy something, this safe could be something that would pull your hair out, because there's so many checks and balances, and you need those check and balances, especially for products that is more like healthcare related, for example, or banking. There's a lot of regulatory, like you need a regulatory team that understands what's going to be deployed to the users, because you want to make sure that it's legally sound. Same with the government. You want to make sure that the features that you're going to deploy is not gonna pull down or will not waste taxpayers' money or something like that. So there's a lot of features. So it's more transparency, it's more top to the bottom. Actually, like I mentioned, it's such a controversial topic. I think some people in the Agile community don't even really think safe is Agile, or there's so much animosity against it, mainly because it's not the fastest. So like I mentioned, now I'm just giving you that background because some people might not know what safe is. But I also just really want to, let me find this. So if you look at it here as well, this is the sort of like what I meant by resources around there, saying that there's a lot of people out there who doesn't even like to consider safe as Agile, or and there's a better one here where you can see that this is safe and this is Agile. If you look at it, this is not as many steps, and this is so many steps out there. So there's that. So I kind of just geeked out on that, but I just wanted to show you those. I just want to show you the differences between those two, because those two kind of, I just wanted to show you the differences because it's such a funny conversation outside of this question, but still a funny conversation. Anyways, so the whole point is how to ensure that Jira is actually used as true collaboration rather than another just task tracking tool, because you just use this to-do list, which most people do. Actually, that's what they're supposed to do. But when it comes to things like environments like safe and all those things, there's, like I mentioned, there's a lot of bureaucracy behind that. And I think most of her question comes around like customization and customized workflow. So that means that, okay, before this ticket goes to prioritization, has this person seen it? If it's labeled regulatory, goes to the regulatory team. Have they signed off? Did they add their thing? Is there a way that it goes down back to the PM, or it goes down to the PO, and then it's next to the goes to PM? Have they signed off? Is it ready for prioritization, or is it ready for this? It depends. So the whole point is that it depends on the process that you have. And so you're trying to figure out whether it's a good situation for you or not. And so you're trying to figure out whether this is, a product, is it a good process for you to go next? I think it's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that you want to know the process first before the tool. And that's always the goal here. And like I told her, in order to do that, in order to actually make Jira a collaboration tool, you want to make sure that you can also do a map. You can map out how the process is currently in that organization. if, for example, this person needs to go to regulatory team first, it needs to do this, like map it all out. Who needs to sign up? Like if this ticket is created, where does it go to next? What's the blockers? What's the where does it go? And where do you need to go, where it needs to go next? Like you just map it out. A BPMN is the best way to do that. And actually that's maybe I'm good at that. So that's what I would do. So I would create like, who's the best customization? How do you do it? Like, where does it go? Like, how does a ticket travel? Because from there, you can figure out the bottlenecks. And from there, like if I were you, if we were working together here, I would do a BPMN. We would talk about how to focusing on the ticket and like how does it currently flow in that organization. And from there, you see like who needs to see it, what needs to happen with it. Is there a sign off? Another thing is there a bottleneck? Can you move this process that is considered a bottleneck here? Like, why do they need to sign off here? Can they not be in the beginning with this person? Because it makes sense for them to just do it together. So that's the whole point of that. And then from there, that's when you start adding in Jira. That's when you start adding in the tool that automates that. But before you have that process, if you just use Jira in accordance to what's currently happening or just the accordance to how it is right now, it's probably going to be as ineffective because you never really truly solve the problem, or you just solved the symptom maybe at most, but you didn't solve the actual problem underneath of it. So that is Jira. That's the second question there. And the third one is how to network without feeling awkward. And this actually came, I think, from two people, because I do think that's from two audiences who are in product management, who just moved to the city, and they want to be in product management a lot more, and they want to meet new people. They want to meet new people. They want to have a network, and there's just, so how would you do that in a new city? And I know that they're from Toronto actually, so but in general, product management and product network allows you to have career growth because it gives you just opportunities. And for that, okay, so that's it. I will just say this. So thank you. That's been fun. I really enjoyed this. Like I mentioned, I'm Paula. I'm a product consultant, and it's been fun kind of just talking about this and talking about product management and talking to you guys, just seeing what your problems are and trying to solve it with you, or learning more about what you do and learning how you do it, and trying to provide that back and forth answer. And yeah, I hope this helped. And I really appreciate any questions, anything that you might have. Send it my way. Anything that I might be able to help for next time, I'd love that. Anyways, appreciate everything. Like I mentioned, I'm Paula, and I hope to see you next.